Many Word of Faith critics have made the observation that William Branham, a healing minister from the 1940s through the 1960s, was a false prophet and false teacher because he denied the doctrine of the Trinity. For that reason, anybody who considered Branham a man of God must be a heretic too. One such man was T.L. Osborn, a great evangelist who brought millions to faith in Jesus around the world during his 60-plus years of ministry. He told his story one time on TBN about seeing Branham ministering to the sick with miracles taking place. God spoke to him and told him that this was what he was lacking when he met with failure on his first trip to India. He went back to India and experienced great success from that time on. What the critic didn't tell his listeners is that William Branham didn't begin teaching Unitarianism until the late 1950s, but Brother Osborn saw Branham's meeting in the 1940s. At that time, Branham was still a Baptist preacher. He came under the influence of the United Pentecostal Church in the 1950s and strayed doctrinally as a result. Brother Hagin told us the story of Branham's false step while I was at Rhema. God told him that Branham started teaching false doctrine and would die prematurely by the end of 1965. He shared that information with Gordon Lindsay, the founder of Christ for the Nations in Dallas, Texas. Brother Lindsay knew Branham well and had traveled with him years earlier. He tried to talk to Branham, but Branham wouldn't listen, unfortunately. Brother Hagin's story confirms what Frida Lindsay, the widow of Gordon Lindsay, who co-founded Christ for the Nations, said in her book, My Diary Secrets. One day Kenneth Hagin came into our offices. He handed Gordon a piece of paper on which was written a prophecy he said the Lord had given him. The prophecy stated that the leader of the deliverance movement was soon to be taken in death because he was getting into error and the Lord was having to remove him from the scene for that reason. Gordon took the prophecy and placed it in his desk. After Brother Hagin left, I asked, "What do you think about this? Is this Branham?" Gordon answered gravely, "Yes, it is Branham. He's getting into error. He thinks he is Elijah. He thinks he is the messenger of the covenant. The sad thing is that unscrupulous men around him are putting words into his mouth, and due to his limited background, he is taking them up." 2 years later, William Branham, who had moved from his home in Jeffersonville, Indiana, was driving to Tucson, Arizona, his new base. In West Texas, he had a head-on collision with a drunken driver and was taken to the hospital. His head became terribly swollen. A tube was placed in his throat to assist his breathing, but on Christmas Eve, 1965, he departed this world, even as the prophecy had stated. A tremendous ministry that had veered from its course. Sister Lindsay's book was published in 1976, long before the critics ever heard of William Branham or Kenneth Hagin. So nobody can claim that she wrote it in response to any critic. This was her honest recollection of what happened. Branham died in late 1965, so Brother Hagin's prophecy was written down and presented to Brother Lindsay in 1963, a full 15 years after Branham's ministry impacted T.L. Osborn and so many others. The critics aren't telling people the whole story. In his later years, Branham went completely off the deep end. Not only did he deny the doctrine of the Trinity, he taught a wacky doctrine called serpent seed, which says that Eve had sex with a serpent which produced Cain. He thought he was Elijah. He also taught the false doctrines of the United Pentecostal Church regarding baptizing in Jesus' name only and various legalist positions. In his earlier years of ministry, however, Branham refused to teach or get entangled with doctrinal issues, stating that he was sent to preach Jesus and win the lost and heal the sick. It was only after he got himself into tax trouble and couldn't afford to hold crusades that he turned to the United Pentecostal churches for ministry opportunities and ended up teaching these views. Branham was a great man of God, but he allowed people of questionable character to lead him astray in his later years, and made shipwreck of his ministry. However, there's no reason to condemn anybody who saw the good in his ministry in his earlier years.